Aisha Malik arrived at the boot camp with a small backpack, quiet eyes, and a nervous smile that she kept forcing onto her face. She wasn't like the other recruits who laughed loudly, showed off their strength, and talked confidently about their future in the military. She stood alone in a corner, watching the others with a mix of fear and hope, trying to breathe normally even though her heart felt like it was punching her chest. This was her dream, something she had waited for years to try. But even as she stood there, she wondered if she already looked like she didn't belong. From the moment she walked into the training ground, people looked at her with judgment. Some hid their smirks, while others didn't bother to. A few whispered to each other, glancing at her small frame, her thin arms, and the way she held herself, almost like she wanted to disappear. It didn't take long before the whispers turned into direct comments. One recruit joked loudly that she looked more like someone applying for a desk job than someone joining tough military training. Another laughed and said she might faint during the first exercise. Aisha heard everything but didn't respond. She just lowered her eyes and pretended she didn't care. She told herself everyone gets tested. Everyone suffers at the beginning. I just have to survive this first day. But deep inside, she felt a sharp sting every time someone laughed. She had known people would judge her, but she didn't expect it to start this fast or feel this harsh. When the first training session started, her struggles became even more obvious. While others completed warm-up runs easily, Aisha ran behind them, breathing heavily, trying hard not to stop. Her legs burned, her chest hurt, and her mind kept telling her she needed to slow down, but she didn't. She pushed her pain aside and kept running, telling herself that quitting now would mean failing even before she began. But the other recruits didn't see her determination. They only saw her slow pace. Some laughed as they passed her, calling out things like, "Hurry up," or, "You'll never survive this place." One even pretended to trip beside her, joking that she was too weak to dodge anything. Aisha ignored them, even though every comment made her feel smaller. When it was time for strength training, things got more embarrassing. Aisha couldn't lift the heavy bags as easily as the others. Her arms trembled, and she almost dropped the bag several times. A couple of trainees started imitating her shaky movements, making fun of her in front of everyone. She heard them laughing behind her, but she refused to turn around. She focused only on the bag, on her grip, on the floor beneath her feet. Anything to stop herself from crying. Still, she didn't complain or ask for help. She pushed through the pain quietly, moving slowly but never stopping. She wanted to prove herself, but every attempt ended with someone mocking her. During the next drill, she tried climbing a short wall. Most trainees climbed over it in seconds. Aisha, however, struggled to get a good grip. Her hands kept slipping, and her arms didn't have enough power to pull her up properly. She tried again and again, each attempt more painful than the last. The instructor shouted at her to try harder, but the recruits standing nearby whispered and snickered. One of them asked loudly, "Is she even trying?" Another said, "She should go home now before she hurts herself." Aisha finally reached the top, her body shaking, but she didn't smile or celebrate. She just climbed down quietly, trying to ignore the burning shame inside her chest. She wanted to hide. She wanted to disappear. But more than anything, she wanted to prove them wrong. Deep inside, she was fighting a battle no one could see. Her body carried memories that still haunted her. A past injury, an accident, a pain she never talked about. She hid it from everyone, along with the long scar on her back. None of the trainees knew why she moved carefully, why she avoided certain angles, or why she stayed away when they changed uniforms. They assumed she was shy or strange. They didn't know she was hiding something that still hurt her both physically and emotionally. At lunchtime, she sat alone while everyone else gathered in groups. Some talked about her openly, making jokes as if she wasn't sitting just a few tables away. Aisha kept her eyes on her food, forcing herself not to react. She didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing her hurt. She told herself that one day things would change. One day they would understand why she was fighting so hard. But for now, she was just the weak recruit everyone laughed at. Even then, Aisha didn't give up. She stayed quiet, But inside her silence was a strong determination. She had faced worse things in life than rude comments. She had survived things that would have broken most people. And though no one knew it yet, she carried a strength that was deeper than physical muscles. This first day of boot camp showed her that the road ahead would be much harder than she imagined. But she also knew something important. She hadn't come here to be accepted. She came here to become stronger, no matter what it cost her. And this was only the beginning. The next few days at boot camp became even harder for Aisha. Instead of improving, things felt like they were getting worse. Every morning started before sunrise, with loud whistles and shouting, and the trainees rushed out of their tents to start the day. Most of them joked around, stretching and warming up easily. But Aisha always felt tired, as if her body needed more time to wake up. Her muscles hurt from the previous day, and her legs felt heavy every time she tried to run. The other recruits noticed her struggles, and soon her weaknesses became something they laughed about. Whenever she ran, people pointed at how slowly she moved. When she lifted weights, they laughed at her shaking arms. Even during simple drills where everyone had to move in perfect coordination, her timing was a little off. Every mistake she made became entertainment for the others. One group of trainees formed a habit of recording her during exercises. They pretended it was harmless fun, but they always laughed while doing it. They captured moments where she slipped, tripped, or fell behind the group. During breaks, they replayed those short clips on their phones, laughing loudly and sharing them in private chats. Aisha heard bits of their conversations but tried not to react. She didn't want to show them that their actions hurt her, even though her heart sank every time she saw someone whisper and then look at her. The trainers themselves didn't show much patience with her either. They were strict with everyone, but with Aisha, they seemed harsher. Some trainers assumed she wasn't trying, or that she didn't have the strength needed for this place. One instructor said loudly, "If you can't keep up, you won't last here." Another told her, "You need to push harder, otherwise there's no point in staying." Their words were meant to motivate, but to Aisha, they felt like reminders that she didn't belong. Still, she pushed herself. She practiced even during breaks, trying to improve her running, her push-ups, and her climbing skills. But even when she improved a little, the progress wasn't big enough for others to notice. During one drill, everyone had to crawl through a muddy ground while carrying heavy bags. Most trainees complained loudly about the mud, but they still moved quickly. Aisha fell behind again. Her arms and knees hurt with every movement. Mud got into her eyes, her hair, and her clothes, making it harder for her to continue. One trainee behind her said sarcastically, "Don't stop. We're not here to watch you rest." Another laughed and said, "She moves slower than a turtle." Even the trainer shouted at her repeatedly to pick up her pace. Aisha wanted to scream or cry, but she kept moving. She told herself that pain was temporary. She tried to remind herself why she came here. To rebuild her life, to prove she was stronger than the past that had broken her. But the others didn't know any of that. They only saw her slow movements. They saw her quiet nature and assumed she was weak. They judged her without understanding her story. One night, after the day's drills ended, the trainees relaxed around the campfire. They told stories, laughed, and bonded. Aisha sat a little far away, trying not to draw attention. But even from a distance, she could hear her name being mentioned. One guy said, "Did you see how she slipped during the obstacle course? I thought she was going to cry." Everyone laughed. Another added, "I can't believe she even made it past the first week." Then someone else joked, "Maybe she joined by mistake. Maybe she thought this was a yoga camp." Aisha kept her eyes on the ground, pretending she didn't hear them. She hugged her jacket tighter around herself, not because she was cold, but because she felt exposed. She wished she could disappear into the darkness so no one would see her. Even during meals, people avoided sitting with her. Some ignored her completely, while others looked at her like she didn't belong. No one asked why she trained late at night, why she always stayed fully covered, or why she seemed to be in pain sometimes. They didn't know she had a scar on her back that she never wanted anyone to see. They didn't know she had survived something terrible. They didn't know how hard it was for her to push her body every single day. One evening, when everyone else was relaxing, Aisha quietly walked to the training field. She practiced running alone, breathing heavily, trying to fix her form. She stumbled a few times but kept going. She practiced climbing the rope, even though her arms trembled every time she pulled herself up. She practiced push-ups, sit-ups, and everything else she could think of. She didn't want to be perfect. She just wanted to survive. What she didn't realize was that one trainee saw her training alone. He watched her for a moment, surprised. He had never seen someone push themselves so hard after such a long, exhausting day. He didn't say anything to her, but for the first time, he wondered if they had all judged her too quickly. But for now, Aisha still faced a long battle. Every day brought new tests, new pain, and new humiliation. People continued laughing, making jokes, and sharing videos of her stumbling. But despite all of that, she kept showing up. She kept trying. She refused to quit. Because she knew something no one else knew. She had already survived the hardest part of her life. Boot camp was painful, but it wasn't the worst thing she had faced. And even though no one noticed yet, she was slowly getting stronger. And one day they would see it. Every night at boot camp ended the same way for Aisha. The lights went off, the camp became quiet, and everyone fell asleep quickly after the long day of training. But Aisha rarely slept peacefully. She lay awake for hours, staring at the roof of her tent, listening to the soft breathing of the other recruits. She looked calm on the outside, but inside her heart felt heavy. Her body ached from the drills, but the pain that bothered her the most wasn't the soreness. It was the memories she tried so hard to forget. When she finally closed her eyes, sleep didn't bring her rest. Instead, it brought nightmares. She saw flashes of fire, loud noises, and people shouting. She felt the panic she experienced years ago during an accident that changed her life forever. In her dreams, she ran through smoke-filled hallways, searching for a way out. She heard a crashing sound and felt heat burning her back. Every night, she woke up with her heart racing and her body shaking. Sometimes she covered her mouth quickly so she wouldn't scream and wake the others. No one at the boot camp knew about her past. They didn't know she once survived a tragedy, one that left her with a deep scar running down her back. The scar wasn't just a mark on her skin. It held memories of fear, loss, and survival. It reminded her of the pain she never talked about. Because of that scar, she moved more carefully than others. She avoided sudden twists. She avoided lifting too much weight at once. But she never told anyone why she struggled. She also avoided situations where she might have to show her back. During showers, she waited for everyone else to finish before she went inside. She always wore her shirt until the very last moment and put it back on before anyone could look. When they changed uniforms, she stood facing the corner, hoping no one would notice her acting differently. Some trainees found her behavior strange and whispered about it, but Aisha ignored them. She wasn't hiding because she was shy. She was hiding because the scar was a part of her life she didn't want anyone to see or judge. Even though the scar had healed physically, it still hurt sometimes. During intense exercises, her back would ache suddenly, forcing her to slow down. She tried her best to hide the pain, but the stiffness in her shoulders sometimes made her movements look awkward. The other trainees saw her struggle but assumed she was simply weak. They didn't know she was fighting not just fatigue, but old wounds that never fully went away. At night, after waking from her nightmares, Aisha couldn't go back to sleep immediately. She usually stepped out of her tent quietly and walked toward the empty training field. Under the dim moonlight, she practiced alone. She ran slow laps, stretched her body, or repeated drills she had trouble with during the day. Sometimes she climbed the rope or practiced balancing exercises. She did all of this even though her back hurt, even though her hands shook, even though her body begged her to rest. But training alone in the quiet night felt different. There were no loud voices shouting at her, no trainees laughing behind her back, no one filming her mistakes. It was just her and the empty field. In these quiet moments, she felt stronger. She could focus on improving herself without fear of judgment. Even though she was exhausted, these late-night sessions gave her a small sense of control in a place where everything else felt overwhelming. Some nights, She sat on the ground for a while, thinking about her past. She remembered the accident vividly. The flames, the fear, the feeling of her skin burning, the long months in the hospital, the doctors telling her that she might never regain full movement again. She remembered how people pitied her, how some said she would never live a normal life, how others believed she would always be fragile. Maybe that was why she came to the boot camp, even though it seemed impossible at first. She wanted to rebuild herself. She wanted to prove to herself that she was not broken. She wanted to show that the scar on her back didn't define her life. She wanted to regain a sense of strength that she had lost long ago. But on the outside, no one saw any of this. All they saw was a girl who struggled with drills. A girl who was slow. A girl who could barely lift weights. A girl who looked scared half the time. No one knew the fight she was fighting inside her mind and inside her body. Every morning, after a long night of battling nightmares and training alone, Aisha returned to her tent quietly before anyone woke up. She washed her face, tied her hair, and prepared for another difficult day. She never told anyone about her nightmares. She never talked about her pain. She kept everything inside and showed up every day, hoping no one would notice how tired she really was. But deep down, she knew she couldn't hide forever. One day, the truth about her scar would come out. One day, someone would see it. And when that moment came, she didn't know what would happen. Would people laugh? Would they pity her? Would they judge her even more? She didn't have the answers. All she could do was try her best to survive each day. She reminded herself that she had already been through worse things in life. Boot camp was tough, but she was tougher. She just had to believe it. And little did she know, soon everyone at the camp would see a side of her they never expected. The scar she was hiding would reveal a truth that would change everything. The day of the endurance test arrived with more pressure than usual. The trainers announced that this test would be one of the hardest challenges of the entire boot camp. Everyone had to complete a long course filled with mud pits, climbing walls, crawling tunnels, heavy loads, and a final water crossing. The trainees groaned, some laughed nervously, and others looked excited. But Aisha felt her stomach twist. Her back had been hurting since early morning, and she feared the pain would get worse during the test. Still, she stood quietly at the starting line, trying to hide her fear behind a calm face. When the whistle blew, everyone rushed forward with energy. Aisha tried to keep up but quickly fell behind the group. The first part of the test was a long run through uneven ground. The trainees ran like a wave, fast and powerful. Aisha followed far behind, breathing heavily. Her back started to ache with each step, but she clenched her fists and kept moving. She didn't want the trainers to think she was quitting. After the run came the mud crawl. They had to get down on their hands and knees and crawl through thick, sticky mud under low metal bars. The mud was cold and heavy, sticking to their clothes and slowing them down. Most trainees moved through it quickly, laughing and shouting as they got dirty. But for Aisha, the mud crawl felt like torture. Her back hurt as she bent low, and the weight of the mud made her movements even slower. Some trainees crawling behind her complained loudly, telling her to move faster. One even groaned, "Why is she always in the way?" Aisha didn't answer. She just lowered her head and pushed forward inch by inch. Next came the obstacle walls. Each trainee had to climb up using a rope and swing over to the other side. Everyone else climbed smoothly, pulling themselves up with strong arms. Aisha grabbed the rope and tried to pull herself up. Her arms trembled. Her legs slipped. She tried again and again, her breath becoming shorter with each attempt. She could hear people behind her laughing, saying things like, "She'll never make it," or "Just give up already." But she didn't stop. She kept trying until finally, after several painful attempts, she reached the top and slowly slid down the other side. She was exhausted, but she kept moving. Then came the hardest part, carrying a heavy gear pack through a rocky path. The pack felt like it weighed more than her own body. She lifted it onto her shoulders, but the pressure on her back was almost unbearable. She bit her lip to stop herself from crying out. One wrong move and her back felt like it would tear open. She shuffled forward slowly. Trainees passing by shook their heads, annoyed at how long she was taking. Some mocked her again, saying she was just pretending to be weak for sympathy. She ignored them, focusing on putting one foot in front of the other. Halfway through the path, Aisha stumbled. The heavy pack dragged her down, and she fell to her knees. She tried to get up, but her back screamed in pain. She wanted to rest, just for a second, but the trainers shouted at her to stand up. With trembling hands, she pushed herself up again, refusing to quit. Even though she felt like she might collapse, she forced herself forward. Finally, she reached the water pit, an icy pool of waist-deep water. The trainees had to wade through it while keeping their gear above their heads. As soon as Aisha stepped into the cold water, the shock made her gasp. Her back stiffened at the sudden temperature change. She struggled to lift the gear above her head. Her arms shook violently. She pushed forward slowly, every step heavier than the last. As she tried to climb out of the water pit, her foot slipped on the edge, and she fell backwards into the water, splashing loudly. Her uniform got caught on a piece of barbed wire near the edge of the pit. When she pulled herself up, the sharp edge tore the back of her shirt. A long strip of fabric ripped open, exposing a small part of the scar on her back. For a few seconds, everything felt silent, even though the area was full of shouting and movement. A couple of trainees near her stopped and stared. One of them widened his eyes and whispered, "What is that?" Another looked shocked. They had never seen a scar like that before. It didn't look like a normal injury. It was deep, long, and clearly from something serious. Aisha quickly turned around, pressing her torn shirt against her back so no one else could see. Her heart raced in panic. She cleared the water pit and hurried away, ignoring the pain slicing through her spine. She didn't want anyone to look at her. She didn't want anyone to ask questions. Even though she was embarrassed and scared, she continued the test. She limped through the final part of the course, finishing at the very end. The trainers looked at her with confusion. Her shirt was torn, her back was bleeding lightly, and her face looked pale from pain. But she didn't explain anything. She just stood silently trying to hide the scar. Some trainees who had seen the scar whispered among themselves. They weren't laughing anymore. They weren't mocking her. For the first time, they looked unsure, maybe even guilty. Aisha didn't notice their reactions. All she cared about was covering her back and escaping the whispers. But the incident didn't stay silent. It was reported to the higher officers. And by the next morning, Commander Harris knew everything. The morning after the endurance test felt heavier than usual for Aisha. Her back hurt badly from the torn shirt and the cold water, but she didn't complain. She got up early, washed quickly, and tried to keep her uniform pressed tight against her back so no one could see the damaged fabric. She hoped no one remembered what happened at the water pit. She hoped the small piece of her scar that had shown wasn't noticed by too many people. But the moment she stepped outside her tent, she felt the eyes on her. Some trainees who used to laugh loudly around her were now strangely quiet. They glanced at her, then looked away quickly. Others seemed confused, whispering softly in pairs. The ones who saw the scar yesterday still looked shocked. Their expressions had changed, less mocking, more curious. A few even looked uncomfortable, as if they suddenly realized they had judged her without knowing her story. Aisha pretended not to notice and walked straight to assemble with the rest. She stood in line, eyes forward, trying to disappear into the background. But today something was different. The atmosphere felt tense. Even the trainers looked uneasy. A few minutes later, a stern voice suddenly echoed across the field. "Recruit Aisha Malik, step forward." Her heart dropped. She recognized the voice immediately. It was Commander Harris, the highest-ranking officer at the bootcamp. He rarely called any recruit by name unless it was something serious. Everyone stepped aside, clearing a path for her. She walked slowly toward him, her palms sweating and her heartbeat thundering in her ears. Commander Harris stood tall, with sharp eyes and a face that rarely showed emotion. His presence alone made everyone stand straighter. Aisha stopped in front of him and saluted, hoping he wouldn't notice her trembling hand. "Follow me," he said, his voice firm but not angry. She followed him toward his office, feeling every pair of eyes watching her. Trainees whispered behind her as she passed, wondering what was going on. Some thought she was in trouble. Others thought she was finally being dismissed from the camp. Aisha tried to push those thoughts away, but fear slowly filled her chest. Inside his office, Commander Harris closed the door. The room was quiet, and Aisha felt small standing there. She kept her posture straight, even though her back screamed with pain. "Turn around," the commander said calmly. Aisha froze. She knew what he meant. He wanted to see the injury, the scar she never wanted anyone to know about. She swallowed hard, unable to speak. "Your shirt was torn yesterday during the endurance test," he continued. "The medics reported a large scar on your back. I need to examine the injury to make sure you're fit to continue training." Aisha's breath caught. She wanted to explain, but she didn't know how. She didn't want people to see her scar because it carried memories she wasn't ready to face. But she also knew she couldn't disobey a direct order. Slowly, with shaking hands, she lifted the back of her shirt. The room went silent. Commander Harris stared at the scar that ran across her back. Long, deep, and shaped in a way that told a story without words. It wasn't a small injury or something caused by a minor accident. This was the kind of scar someone got from a life-threatening event. Aisha waited for him to speak, her heart trembling in fear and embarrassment. But the commander didn't say anything at first. Instead, his face changed. His eyes softened. His usual stern expression disappeared. For the first time since she joined Bootcamp, someone wasn't looking at her with judgment. He stepped a little closer and gently asked, "How long ago did this happen?" Aisha hesitated. No one had asked her that question in years. She took a slow breath and answered softly, 3 years ago, sir." He nodded, trying to understand. "A fire." She nodded again. "What happened?" Aisha felt her throat tighten. She didn't want to talk about that night. She didn't want to remember the burning walls, the collapsing ceiling, the desperate escape. But the commander was looking at her with genuine concern, not curiosity or pity. Still, she kept the answer simple. "There was an explosion, sir. I was trapped inside. I barely made it out." A long silence filled the room. Commander Harris looked at the scar again, then at her face. "And you still came here," he said quietly, more to himself than to her. There was no mockery, no judgment. Only a kind of respect she had never expected. She lowered her shirt slowly, feeling exposed but strangely lighter. She expected him to tell her she wasn't fit for the boot camp. She expected him to send her home immediately. But instead, he said something she never imagined. "You should have reported this," he said gently. "Not because you're unfit, but because this shows extraordinary strength." Aisha blinked, confused. She wasn't used to hearing anything positive about herself here. The commander continued, "You survived something that many people don't, and you chose to come here to push yourself again, despite the pain. That takes courage." Aisha felt her eyes sting with tears, but she blinked them away quickly. "I had to try, sir," she whispered. "I didn't want that night to define me." Commander Harris nodded slowly. "It doesn't. But I need to evaluate your condition properly. Not to remove you, but to make sure you're safe." His words shocked her. For the first time, someone wasn't trying to push her out. Instead, someone wanted to help her stay. "Report to the medical unit after this," he said. "And Aisha?" He paused, then added in a softer tone, "Don't hide your strength. You've earned your place here more than you think." Aisha stood there, stunned. She had expected punishment, humiliation, or dismissal. Instead, she received understanding, respect, and something she hadn't felt since she arrived here, hope. Part 6 begins at a moment when everything inside Emily feels heavy, yet strangely balanced. The truth about her scar is now out, and the commander's reaction has changed the atmosphere in the entire boot camp. For the first time since she arrived, Emily feels seen. Not for her weakness, not for the small mistakes she made, not for the quiet personality she carried, but for something deeper. Still, she is not fully sure how everyone will treat her now, and this uncertainty sits in the back of her mind like a constant echo. The next morning starts before sunrise. The sky is still gray, and the cold wind cuts across the training field. Emily steps out of her barracks slowly, expecting the same snide looks, the same whispers that usually followed her everywhere. Instead, she finds a strange silence. The recruits who used to laugh at her now glance at her with confused expressions. Some with guilt, some with curiosity, some with pure discomfort. No one says a word. She walks past them, not rushing, not avoiding anyone. She simply walks like someone who has survived something larger than all of them combined. During the warm-up drills, the tension grows stronger. The instructor calls Emily to join the front row, something that never happened before. Usually, she was pushed to the last line, where people expected her to struggle, but today the instructor watches her carefully, as if testing her strength with new eyes. Emily does every move with quiet determination. She doesn't try to show off. She doesn't try to prove anything. She only wants to continue what she came here for, building herself again, piece by piece. Halfway through training, the commander arrives on the field. Everyone straightens up instantly. He is not yelling today, not walking with the loud boots they all fear. Instead, he walks slowly, almost thoughtfully. He stops right beside Emily. The recruits inhale sharply, waiting to see if she will be punished or praised. He doesn't look at her with pity. He looks at her like someone who recognizes a familiar kind of pain. Without raising his voice, he says, "Carry on." His tone is calm, but the weight behind those two words is heavy enough to silence even the loudest troublemakers. Emily nods and continues. What she doesn't know yet is that the commander has already spoken to the officers about her. He learned the full report of her past, the day she saved her brother, the operation that left her scar, and the months of recovery she endured. He even learned something Emily never told anyone, that doctors had once told her she might never run again. And now, watching her run across the field without slowing down, he realizes she has already beaten the odds. After the drills, the recruits take a short break. A girl named Ria, who was part of the group that mocked Emily earlier in the training, walks toward her slowly. Emily braces herself for another rude comment, but something unexpected happens. Ria lowers her eyes and says softly, "I didn't know what you went through. I'm sorry." The apology feels strange but sincere. Emily takes a moment, then simply nods. She doesn't need dramatic forgiveness or emotional speeches. A quiet acknowledgement is enough. As the day moves forward, Emily begins to notice more changes around her. A few recruits hold doors open for her. Some step aside to let her pass. Others no longer laugh when she struggles with a drill. And though not everyone becomes kind overnight, the disrespect fades. It is replaced by a kind of confused respect they don't yet know how to express. Emily notices all of it, but she doesn't let it distract her. She keeps training harder than ever. During rifle practice, something surprising happens. Emily hits multiple targets accurately, one after another. She never got much attention for her shooting skills before, but now the instructor watches with interest. "Good control," he comments. That short compliment gives Emily a small spark of confidence. For the first time, she wonders if she might actually excel here, not just survive. Later that evening, the commander calls her into his office. Emily stands straight, her hands behind her back, waiting anxiously. He studies her silently for a moment before speaking. "You're stronger than you know," he says. "Not because of your scar, but because of the fight behind it." Emily lowers her eyes slightly, unsure how to respond. No one has spoken to her like this before, especially not someone in authority. "You came here to move forward," he continues. "And I believe you can." When she finally leaves the room, she feels lighter. Not completely healed, not fully confident, but seen, truly seen for the first time. That night, lying on her bunk, Emily stares at the ceiling. She remembers how she first arrived at Bootcamp, nervous, shy, unsure of her place. Now the air around her feels different. She's not just the quiet girl anymore. She's the girl who survived fire, who carried pain in silence, who stood strong when people mocked her. She closes her eyes and finally lets herself imagine a future where she stands tall, where she earns her place with strength she's always carried but never acknowledged. And for the first time since joining the bootcamp, she falls asleep with a small, peaceful smile. Part 7 begins at a time when Emily's growth becomes more visible, not just in her actions but in the way others now look at her. The bootcamp has seen many trainees come and go, but rarely someone who carried quiet strength like hers. The recruits who once mocked her now move aside when she walks past. They don't speak much to her, but the tone has changed. There is no laughter behind her back, no whispers mocking her every struggle. Instead, there is caution, curiosity, and a kind of respect that slowly grows each day. Early in the morning, during the long run around the dusty tracks, Emily notices something different. She is not at the back anymore. She runs near the middle, sometimes even passing recruits who used to outrun her easily. Her breathing is steady, her steps strong. It feels strange to realize that she is improving, not because she wants to show anyone anything, but because she has finally stopped doubting herself. The instructor, who never paid her much attention before, now keeps an eye on her progress. When she finishes her run much faster than her previous times, he simply nods at her with a small approving look. It is not a spoken praise, but for Emily, it feels louder than words. The real challenge begins during obstacle course training. This part has always been difficult for her. The high walls, the rope climbs, the narrow tunnels. The scar on her back sometimes reacts to sudden movements, giving her sharp pain. But today, she decides she will push beyond fear. The sun is hitting hard, and dust rises every time someone hits the ground. When Emily reaches the tall wooden wall, something she struggled with many times before, she pauses only for a moment. She can hear a few recruits behind her whisper, wondering if she will fail again. But something in her heart feels different now. She takes a deep breath, sprints forward, jumps, and reaches the top edge. For a moment, she slips, her fingers barely holding on. Her scar burns sharply, but she doesn't let go. Then something unexpected happens. Ria, the same girl who once laughed at her, steps forward and supports her from below, giving her the push she needs. Emily climbs over the wall and drops to the other side with a determined exhale. Ria doesn't ask for gratitude. She simply nods with a small smile before running ahead. That moment stays in Emily's mind like a warm mark, proof that people really can change. The rest of the course becomes a test of willpower. The rope climb is painful. Emily can feel the strain on her back, but she pushes upward anyway. Her hands hurt, her arms shake, yet she refuses to stop. When she rings the bell at the top, several recruits turn toward her with surprised expressions. They never expected her to come this far. As she moves through the tunnel crawl, she imagines her younger brother cheering for her the way he used to. The memory pushes her forward. She emerges from the tunnel covered in dust, but with a small smile on her face. When the course ends, Emily is exhausted but deeply proud. For the first time, she finishes within the average time, not the slowest, not the weakest, just normal. And for her, normal feels like a huge victory. Later in the evening, while everyone is resting, an announcement surprises the entire camp. The commander orders a special group of trainees to gather near the training shed. Emily's name is called. Her heart skips. She has no idea what this means. When she arrives, the commander is already there, standing tall with his hands behind his back. He looks at the selected group, only 8 recruits. These are the ones who have shown exceptional improvement, teamwork, or potential. Emily never imagined she would be among them. The commander steps forward slowly and says, "You 8 will begin advanced drills tomorrow. You have shown that you possess not just skills, but character." Emily's heart feels warm at his words. She stands still, trying to absorb the moment. She used to think she was invisible in this camp, but now she stands in a group that people admire. Some of the recruits watching from a distance seem surprised, even shocked, that she is selected. But Emily no longer worries about their opinions. When the meeting ends, the commander stops her for a moment as others walk away. He speaks quietly, but his voice carries a firm respect. "Your scar is not your weakness," he says. "It is the reminder of your strength. Don't ever hide it from yourself." Emily doesn't know how to respond at first. No one has ever spoken to her like this, recognizing her pain yet honoring her courage. She finally nods and says softly, "Thank you, sir." That night, back in the barracks, Emily lies awake again. But this time it is not because of fear or worry. It is because her mind is full of hope. She remembers the girl she was when she arrived. Nervous, unsure, constantly questioning if she belonged. Now she feels herself changing. Not into someone new, but into the person she always had the potential to be. As she looks at the faint reflection of her scar in the window, she doesn't feel ashamed anymore. Instead, she feels proud. This scar carried her through fire, literally and emotionally. And now, it is guiding her toward a future she once thought she couldn't reach. Emily closes her eyes with a quiet, content smile. Tomorrow will bring harder challenges, tougher drills, more tests of strength. But she is no longer afraid. She is ready. The final day of the training exercise had arrived. The sun rose over the camp, bright and unforgiving, as if daring the recruits to give their all one last time. Emily stood at the assembly, her body sore, her muscles aching, but her mind clearer than it had ever been. She had grown stronger, not just in her body, but in her spirit. Every day, every drill, every moment of doubt had led to this point. And she knew it. The instructors explained that the last test would combine everything they had learned over the past weeks. Running, climbing, crawling, teamwork, and mental endurance. The challenge was designed to push them to the absolute limit. Many recruits were nervous, exchanging worried glances, but Emily felt a strange calm. Fear still lingered, but it had transformed into determination. She had faced fear before, and now she understood she could survive it again. The whistle blew, and the trainees surged forward. Emily started at her own pace, steady and controlled. She didn't rush, didn't try to keep up with others, and didn't worry about who was ahead or behind. She focused only on the path in front of her, the obstacles she had to overcome, and the strength she carried inside. The first obstacle was the mud pit. Thick, heavy, and clinging to their uniforms, the mud slowed everyone down. Emily dropped to her hands and knees, letting the cold, sticky mess coat her, but she moved steadily. With each push forward, she remembered all the nights she trained alone, the countless hours she endured pain and fear in silence. Those memories gave her a strange kind of power. She wasn't just crawling through mud. She was crawling through the remnants of her old doubts and insecurities, leaving them behind with each inch she advanced. After the mud came the climbing walls. Emily approached the first one with quiet confidence. She gripped the rope, lifted her body, and began to ascend. Her arms shook, her back protested, but she didn't stop. Higher and higher she climbed, thinking about all the people who had doubted her, the trainees who had laughed, and the fear that had once consumed her. When she reached the top and swung over, she landed firmly on the other side, breathing hard but smiling to herself. She had done it not for anyone else but for herself. Next was the balance course. Narrow beams stretched over a shallow pit, demanding careful footwork and concentration. Emily moved slowly, feeling every shift in her weight. She remembered her scar, the pain it sometimes brought, and the nights she had lain awake worrying that her body would fail her again. But this time, she didn't let fear control her. Step by step, she crossed the beams, steady, confident, unshaken by the whispers of others or the wind brushing past her. The final challenge was the water obstacle. Cold, heavy, and shocking, it forced every recruit to push past exhaustion. Emily stepped in, heart racing, remembering the incident from earlier when her scar had first been noticed. She tensed as icy water surrounded her, but she focused on the rhythm of her steps, the steady lift of the gear above her head, the beat of her own heart. She thought of all the nights she had run alone, all the practice she had done silently in the dark, and she realized that nothing could stop her now. She pushed forward, ignoring the sting, the weight, the fatigue. As she climbed out of the water pit, a few trainees turned to look at her. Their expressions were no longer mocking. They were in awe. They had watched her struggle, seen her pain, and now they were witnessing her determination. Emily's scar, hidden beneath her shirt, was still there, but it no longer defined her in shame. It was part of her story, part of her strength. When the course finally ended, Emily stood at the finish line, drenched, exhausted, but triumphant. The instructors and Commander Harris approached. For a moment, everyone was silent, watching her. Then the commander stepped forward, his expression a mixture of pride and respect. "You have completed this course with courage, strength, and determination," he said. "Not everyone who starts will finish, but you did. And you did it with everything against you. Your past, your pain, your fears. Today, you've shown what it means to be resilient. You've shown true strength." Emily felt something inside her chest swell, a combination of relief, pride, and gratitude. She had feared this day for weeks, even months, but now that it was here, she realized how far she had come. She had gone from the girl who was ridiculed, laughed at, and doubted, to the woman who had conquered her fears and earned respect not through words or appearances, but through actions and perseverance. The other trainees, who had once mocked her, now approached cautiously. Some shook her hand, others nodded silently, and a few even offered small smiles of apology. Emily didn't need their approval, but she accepted their gestures with quiet dignity. She had earned this moment for herself, and nothing else mattered. Later, as the sun began to set and the camp settled into evening, Emily sat quietly, looking at the scar on her back in the reflection of a small puddle. It was no longer something to hide, no longer a mark of weakness. It was proof of survival, courage, and determination. It was a reminder of how far she had come and what she could endure. For the first time in years, Emily felt whole. Not because the boot camp had changed her, but because she had chosen to face everything that had once held her back. She realized that strength is not about being perfect, fast, or flawless. It is about rising every time life pushes you down, about facing pain, and continuing to move forward. As she walked back to her tent, tired but proud, Emily felt the eyes of the other recruits following her, not with mockery, but with respect. She had earned it, quietly, steadily, and powerfully. And deep inside, she knew that this was only the beginning. Life would throw more challenges her way, but now she had the courage, the strength, and the confidence to face them all, scar and all.